For most of my viewers, there is perhaps no vehicle that is quintessentially American like the pickup truck is. Of course, Japanese car companies have been trying to compete in the pickup truck segment for some time, most notably Nissan and Toyota with their range of compact, mid-size, and now full-size pickup trucks. Honda, on the other hand, has had a relatively hands-off approach with the pickup truck segment, although they have done one pickup truck in the past. Now for 2017, they're back with an all-new Honda Ridgeline. This is the second pickup truck that Honda has ever sold in the United States. The big deal, of course, for the 2017 Ridgeline, very much like the first Honda Ridgeline, is that this is the only unibody pickup truck sold in the US. Up front, we get a design that's instantly recognizable as a Honda and instantly recognizable as a pickup truck. We have this larger and bolder front grille than we see in any other Honda product out there. We have optional LED headlamps available. They are LED low beams. High beams remain halogen even in the top end trims, and fog lights down below. Our model is the top end black edition trim, so we have a few trim pieces that are a little bit different than the other models. We also have all of the options, including radar adaptive cruise control behind that Honda logo and front parking sensors. Some of you following me on Facebook were a little bit confused about how large the Ridgeline is. This is not a full-size pickup truck, so this does not directly compete with the Ram 1500, Silverado 1500, Ford F-150, although I could see people cross-shopping this with a half-ton pickup truck and seeing this as a more practical alternative. At 210 inches long, this is actually a little bit smaller than a Toyota Tacoma, a GMC Canyon, or a Chevy Colorado. This is very firmly in what is commonly referred to as the mid-sized pickup truck segment. Some people call this segment the compact pickup truck segment, but the truth is these are considerably larger than those old Toyota T100s that we remember from the 80s and 90s. Those were quite a bit smaller than this. This is, however, only available in one body style, the one that we're seeing right here, and that has the larger cab with front doors and rear doors and the 5-foot 3-inch bed behind it. That means that this Honda is about 2 feet shorter than the longest versions of the Toyota or the GM small pickup trucks. When you look at the side profile, you'll notice a few things right away. The first thing you'll notice is that this hood appears to be a little bit shorter than the average pickup truck in America, and you notice that this front tire is actually pushed a little bit further rearward than the average pickup truck in America. The reason for that is that the Ridgeline is a front-wheel drive based pickup truck. You can get it in either front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive forms, but either way, the engine is sitting across the front, and that results in a relative space efficiency versus most pickup trucks. We can have a slightly shorter hood, a vehicle that's overall the same length, and then get a little bit more room on the inside than some of the competition. The other thing you'll notice is right back here, because the bed and the body of the vehicle are not really separate components like we find in other pickup trucks, because again, this is a unibody SUV, and that means that the body and the frame are basically all one part. In most pickup trucks in America, most vans, most large SUVs, there is a separate frame, and the engine, the suspension parts, those all mount to the frame. And then the body, which is all that you see here, the interior of the vehicle, etc., that mounts on top of the frame. And the truck bed in a traditional pickup truck is a completely separate part. You can remove the truck bed and you can still drive the vehicle away. There's no problem there. In the Honda Ridgeline, the bed is an integral part of the structure of the vehicle. Some of you out there might be thinking to yourself, a unibody pickup truck would surely fold like a taco when you put something heavy in the back. But the truth of the matter is that this vehicle, very much like a number of other large crossovers out there that are technically unibody vehicles, are somewhere between the traditional land of unibody and frame. Because we do have a boxed frame-like arrangement under this vehicle. The difference is that the frame is actually one part of the body. So the body and the frame are actually welded together to improve strength, so you can't just remove the frame from the vehicle like you could in a traditional body-on-frame vehicle. The rear end looks basically like every other pickup truck out there. We have a standard towing hitch receiver down there, standard wiring harness connector, parking sensors right back here, large Honda logo front and center, but things get a little bit different when we start taking a look at the tailgate. The tailgate not only flips down like a traditional pickup truck's, but it also opens to the side like that to allow easier access to the bed, especially if you wanted to do something right here at the back of the bed and you wanted to get up real close to it. You may be wondering why this is a useful feature. The reason for that is this bed also has a trunk built into it. With the in-bed trunk open, you can really see why the tailgate moves in this direction, because it's a lot easier to get right here into the trunk and interact with it. When the trunk lid is closed, it locks with the vehicle, and the lock and the latch are actually hidden by the tailgate right here, making it a little bit harder for people to tell that the trunk exists when the tailgate is closed. There are two things to know about this tailgate. It is not damped like we see in other pickup trucks, so you do have to carry its whole weight when opening or closing it. And it does not latch into the open position. If we were to open this all the way right like this and you're on a hillside, it will end up closing on you if you're not careful. Under the hood, we find a very familiar Honda engine. This is a 3.5-liter Earth Dreams direct injection V6 engine, essentially shared with a wide variety of Honda and Acura products. In this vehicle, it produces 280 horsepower and 262 pound-feet of torque. This engine also offers Honda's latest cylinder deactivation system in order to improve highway fuel economy. This is mated to a 6-speed automatic transaxle, sending power by default to the front wheels. So you can actually get a front-wheel drive version of the Ridgeline now. The previous version was all-wheel drive only. Of course, all-wheel drive is optional. That will send up to 50% of the power to the rear wheels, assuming that there is no wheel slip, and depending on the situation, it can send just a little bit more to the rear. Fuel economy comes in at 22 miles per gallon combined for the two-wheel drive model, 21 miles per gallon combined for the all-wheel drive model. Those are some of the highest fuel economy numbers in this particular segment, although I do expect to see the 2017 Chevy Colorado with its all-new engine and all-new 8-speed automatic transmission either matching or perhaps even beating the 2017 Ridgeline. We just don't know what that will be rated at yet. The payload capacity is essentially the same as every other mid-sized pickup in America. It's right about 1,500 pounds regardless of whether you get front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, but you remember earlier I said that there were pros and cons to the unibody design of the Ridgeline, and towing capacity is one of those trade-offs because towing capacity comes in at 3,500 pounds for the front-wheel drive model, 5,000 pounds for the all-wheel drive model. That makes this the lowest towing capacity in this particular segment. If you properly equip your small GM pickup truck, you can tow up to 7,700 pounds. The Toyota Tacoma will tow about 6,800 and the Nissan about 6,500. So this is at least 1,500 pounds below the other entries in this particular segment. However, for most Americans, this will probably suffice because 5,000 pounds will definitely tow a wide variety of camping trailers, cargo trailers. You can also even tow a horse trailer with 2 average-sized horses in it. They'll be right around that 5,000 pound maximum. Front seat comfort is excellent in the Ridgeline and significantly better than the Toyota Tacoma. Interior comfort is definitely an area where the unibody design of the Ridgeline pays dividends because we simply have more room available on the inside, especially than we see in the Toyota Tacoma. Because the Tacoma has to have that frame between the bottom of the vehicle and the interior of the vehicle, and this vehicle does not, we actually have a larger opening right here than we see in the Toyota Tacoma. We have more headroom. I have about 3 inches left here, even though we are in the model with the optional sunroof. We also have a tilt telescopic steering column, power driver seat, 2-way adjustable lumbar support, and a 2-position seat memory over there. So we get a lot more luxury features than we see, especially in that Toyota as well. Rear seat comfort is excellent for this segment, but one of the big reasons is actually because of the amount of room that we find up front. I was able to sit in a very upright position, which is typically my preference, and that gives me an awful lot more legroom than we find in most entries in this segment. I still have about 3.5 inches of legroom left there. Hair is not touching the ceiling, have about 2 inches of headroom left. Moving over to the middle seat, it's basically the same thing because the rear bench seat is very broad and very flat. Scooting all the way over to the right side of the vehicle, this front seat is all the way back in its tracks, suitable for a 6'5" passenger. I still have about 3/4 of an inch of legroom left. These rear seats also move in some interesting ways because this seat bottom cushion lifts up and locks into place, making it much easier to put large cargo in the vehicle. And on the floor, we don't have any boxes or anything like that taking up extra space. The floor is actually quite flat, all the way from the back here, all the way up to the front of the vehicle. Obviously, the Ridgeline gets 10 out of 10 points in our exclusive Trunk Comfort Index, just like every other pickup truck sold in the United States. However, we do get bonus points for having this in-bed trunk. It's actually an awful lot handier than I thought it would be initially. For some reason, I thought it might be just a little bit gimmickier than it actually is. As we take a look around the interior, keep in mind we are in the top-end black edition, so we do have black edition embroidered on the front headrests. We also have the optional sunroof, and then we have the standard 2-way adjustable shoulder belts and 2-way adjustable headrests. Our model also has the optional leather upholstery, which is perforated here in the seat bottom cushion and the seat back cushion. It has some red contrast there and red stitching. These are heated but not ventilated. The majority of this interior is styled very much like the Honda Pilot, so we have front doors with soft touch upper sections, a soft touch section right there behind the armrest, and a soft touch armrest. We also have storage cubbies below the door. There is one right there by the bottle holder, and then there is one right below the armrest with an even deeper one below that right next to the speaker grill. If we move on over to the dashboard, you'll notice that the overall dashboard style is essentially identical to the Pilot, although we do have some slightly different trim. Our model has the touchscreen infotainment and navigation system, which supports Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. We have tri-zone climate control, which is pretty interesting for a pickup truck. The glove box on the passenger side is one of the larger pickup truck glove boxes. It's a bin style, but it was able to accommodate a large tablet computer. We also have heated seats, a little storage cubby right there for cell phones. It's just about long enough to put a cell phone sideways right there like that. Continuing down from that, we have more storage, 12-volt power outlet, and the USB input for that Apple CarPlay and Android Auto integration. The shifter is a fairly traditional console design. Low is all the way down, drive is one step up from that, and then there is a D4 button, which is sort of like overdrive off, on the left side of the shifter. This button changes the all-wheel drive mode, so you can choose between normal, snow, mud, and sand. We have two large cup holders to the right of that, and then we have a roller cover for the center storage compartment. Thanks to the overall design of the Ridgeline, this center compartment is much larger than we find in any of the other compact pickup trucks in the segment. You can easily put gallons of milk or large purses inside there. The instrument cluster has been essentially borrowed out of the Pilot. We have the large central digital speedometer right there, tachometer on the left, engine temperature and fuel gauge on the right. Notice we also have the various status indications of the safety systems, headlamps, etc. In the center of everything, we have a color multifunction display, which gives us our transmission mode, odometer. We also have trip computer information. We have oil life, tire pressure, etc. The overall steering wheel design is also common with the Pilot. We have small sport grips up top. It's a 4-spoke design with the infotainment buttons over here on the left side of the steering wheel, the cruise control buttons over here on the right side. The first thing you'll notice about the Ridgeline is how much more this feels like the Honda Pilot than your average pickup truck. This has a fully independent suspension in the rear, of course up front as well. The difference is very noticeable, especially on broken pavement in the corners. This feels much more planted, much more competent than your average vehicle with a solid axle in the back. The other thing you're going to notice is how much faster this is than the average compact or mid-sized pickup truck. We ran from 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds in this all-wheel drive model. That's 3/4 of a second faster than the V6 Colorado and a full 1.5 seconds faster than the Tacoma V6. It's about 2 seconds faster than the last time we tested the Nissan Frontier as well. Braking scores were also excellent in the Ridgeline, going from 60 to 0 miles an hour in 133 feet. That's just 2 feet longer than the Chevy Colorado. The Chevy Colorado actually manages to be a little bit lighter than the Ridgeline. That's likely why it goes from 60 to 0 just a little bit shorter, but this definitely takes less distance to brake from highway speeds to 0 than the Toyota Tacoma or the Frontier. So this is going to feel a little bit more nimble out on the roadway, definitely going to feel more like your average crossover than your average pickup truck. Thanks to the full 4-corner independent suspension, the handling numbers are also excellent, and I'm easily going to give this an A. This feels much more sorted out on the road than your average pickup truck of any dimension. Now, the Ridgeline is not going to feel like a Mazda crossover when it comes to handling ability out on the road, but this is actually going to be closer to those crossovers than the average pickup truck in this segment. The ride is also going to feel a little bit more composed than the other pickups in this segment. I'm going to give this an A as well. That's again thanks to the way this suspension is designed. Because if, for instance, the left rear wheel were to run over an imperfection, it doesn't affect the right rear wheel, and that does happen in your average pickup truck. When you're going over very broken pavement, the rear axle tends to wobble and hop in the average pickup truck because they're of course connected together, and that's not going on in this vehicle. So while it may sound a little bit counterintuitive, this actually feels more solid and more put together when you're driving this over rough terrain, and that would be like a very rutted dirt road or a gravel road, than your average pickup truck. Obviously, this suspension was not designed to tackle things like a Baja endurance race, but this suspension is more than capable of handling your average weekend camping excursion. Thanks to the overall design of the Ridgeline, this cabin is significantly quieter than the Toyota or the Nissan competition. We scored 70 decibels at 50 miles an hour, and that makes this several decibels quieter than the most recent Tacoma that we reviewed. This is a little bit quieter than GM's compact pickup trucks, and those were previously the quietest entries in this segment for 2016. Fuel economy is also excellent in this vehicle. We are driving the all-wheel drive version, but we have still been averaging 21.5 miles per gallon, which is a hair above what the EPA says you should average. That's definitely a number of miles per gallon ahead of the Toyota Tacoma. In a nutshell, the best way to describe the Ridgeline really is the pickup truck version of the Honda Pilot. This drives very much like your average 3-row crossover, only we have a pickup truck bed in the back, not a third row. In rather an unusual move, Honda has created a ton of different trims for the Ridgeline, 7 to be exact, and all of them can be had with all-wheel drive except for the top 2 trims in which all-wheel drive is standard. Things start out in the RT trim, which is the base trim, and this is sort of a decontented trim. So they've actually removed things that you would typically expect to find in a vehicle, like the exterior temperature display, we don't have fog lights, and we don't have seat back pockets, among other things. Therefore, I really think that the RTS that's on this chart is the real base price at $31,515. Now, this is not an unusual move. Basically, every car company out there tends to do this with their base model, but the RTS model is the first one you're going to find things that you start to expect in a modern $30,000 vehicle, like remote keyless entry, remote start, 3-zone automatic climate control, and those fog lights that were removed to make the RT trim. If you want leather seating in your Ridgeline, that would be the $33,780 RTL trim. We also get the power lumbar support with the power driver's seat and an acoustic windshield. Now, our cabin noise tests were performed in the top-end trim, which also had that acoustic windshield, so if you get the models below the RTL, then it actually will be a little bit louder in the cabin. The next trim up worth noting is the Rtl Ii trim, and that's where you're going to find Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and factory navigation. Then we have the Rtl Ii and the Black Edition, which are really both the top-end trim of the Ridgeline. The Rtl Ii is about $1,500 less expensive than the Black Edition, and the only major difference between the two is some of the unique styling tweaks that you get in the Black Edition trim that we've been looking at. In the Rtl Ii and the Black Edition, all-wheel drive becomes standard. We also get the standard Honda sensing system, which has the radar adaptive cruise control, blind spot information, pre-collision braking, lane keeping assistance, LED headlamps, the heated steering wheel, integrated inverter, all that sort of thing. This is basically the fully loaded Ridgeline. It's worth noting that some of the features you find in that Honda sensing package are not even available in a number of full-size American pickup trucks. Before we dive straight into the comparisons, we should talk about the optional $1,800 all-wheel drive system. This system is very unique amongst transverse engine designs. Again, transverse means that the engine is across the engine bay, not longitudinal or down the vehicle. Most transverse all-wheel drive systems can only send 50% of the power to the rear axle when they lock the center clutch pack. Things are a little bit different in this all-wheel drive system because they actually make the rear wheels spin slightly faster than the front wheels. This is again the same trick that Acura uses in the super handling all-wheel drive systems. This has the effect of shifting more power to the rear axle than would otherwise be possible. Then we have clutch packs that are inside the rear differential unit that actually torque vector across the rear axle. So the Honda Ridgeline can not only send more power to the rear axle than your average crossover vehicle, it can actually torque vector and send that power across the rear axle, which is something that no other pickup truck in this segment can do. A mechanical torque vectoring system is normally something that's reserved for performance luxury vehicles, like high-end Audi models or high-end BMW models, especially M and the S and RS trims of those respective models. The torque vectoring system and the ability to send more than 50% of the power to the rear axle when required is part of the reason that the Ridgeline feels so nimble out on the road. The other key thing to know about this particular system is that it is a full-time all-wheel drive system. That means this system is always trying to split power between the front axle and the rear axle, depending on what is needed for either performance, efficiency, best handling, or adverse weather conditions. And that's very different than every other pickup truck in this segment. Every other pickup truck in this segment uses a more traditional part-time four-wheel drive system. Part-time four-wheel drive systems are easily identified because they either have a lever or they have a knob on the dashboard, and the knob or the lever is either in two-wheel drive mode, 4 high, sometimes 4 low if you have a low-range gear ratio. The key thing to know about part-time four-wheel drive systems is that you should never engage the four-wheel drive mode on dry pavement. The reason for that is it completely locks the center coupling. There is no center differential, there is no clutch pack to try and vary the power front to rear, it's just firmly locked. Obviously, the Honda system is not designed for completing a Baja race, going mudding, going rock crawling, etc. It's not that kind of a system. Instead, what the Honda system does for you is give you excellent traction in adverse weather conditions that is honestly superior to any other truck in this segment. In essentially every on-road adverse weather driving situation, you don't really want a center coupling that's locked all the time. You want a center coupling that can lock when it needs to, but spends most of its time apportioning power front and rear as it sees fit. Let's start out our comparisons by talking about the Nissan Frontier. The Frontier is easily the oldest entry in this segment, and it really shows inside the cabin, outside the cabin, and under the hood. The Frontier is one of the thirstiest entries in this segment. It also is one of the slowest 0 to 60. There have been a lot of rumors about a completely redesigned Frontier, but we haven't seen anything firm out of Nissan just yet. You shouldn't expect to see an all-new Frontier until probably late 2017. On the flip side, the Frontier is easily the least expensive entry in this segment. You can get in one for under $20,000, and there's likely to be more cash on the hood available as well. You should know that the base $18,290 price has the smallest cab offered in the Frontier, and it only seats 4. A comparably equipped SV Crew Cab V6 model, which would be the closest comparison to the base Ridgeline, is considerably less expensive than the Ridgeline at $25,460. However, it has thousands of dollars less standard equipment than we find in the Honda. Wrapping the Frontier up, you'll notice that the tow ratings are not necessarily that much higher than the Ridgeline when you comparably equip the vehicles. Next up, we have the Toyota Tacoma. It was recently refreshed by Toyota, but it was a very mild refresh. The reason for that is there is a very large volume or library of aftermarket accessories available for the Tacoma. The Tacoma is easily the most off-road oriented vehicle in this particular segment, although obviously there are off-road versions of the Frontier or the General Motors small pickups. In many ways, the Tacoma is the off-road choice in this segment because of the aftermarket following. If you want snorkel kits, lift kits, shock kits, brake kits, etc., you're going to find those much more easily for the Tacoma than any of the other entries in this particular segment. On the downside, because Toyota decided to keep so many things consistent with the former model, it is easily the least comfortable in this segment. It also is not terribly fuel efficient, and the towing capacity is only about 1,400 pounds higher than we find in the Ridgeline. While the ruggedness and off-road ability of the Tacoma is practically legendary, its on-road prowess definitely lags behind the Honda by a significant amount. The Honda is much more pleasing to drive, it handles better on the road, it's faster 0 to 60, it brakes shorter, etc. In addition, a comparably equipped Tacoma is actually more expensive than the base edition of the Ridgeline. The reason for that is the Tacoma starts with a smaller cab and a 4-cylinder engine. The larger cab and the V6 are standard in the Ridgeline. That means that a comparable Tacoma will actually be nearly $2,000 more expensive when you adjust for all the feature content. The Chevy Colorado and the GMC Canyon are essentially the same pickup truck, although the Canyon is slightly more expensive because they rearranged some of the features, options, and feature packages for the GMC model to make it a little bit more distinct. The best way to describe GM's pickup truck twins is that they look and feel and drive very much like General Motors' full-size pickup trucks brought down to about 8/10 scale. We get a unique 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine that produces a great deal more power and is much more fuel efficient than the 4 cylinders we find in the Nissan and the Toyota. We have a 3.6-liter V6 and 6-speed automatic in the top-end trim, and between the two we have a 2.8-liter 4-cylinder turbo diesel, which is very unique in this particular segment. All new for 2017, however, GM is actually replacing that 3.6-liter V6 with a yet newer 3.6-liter V6 and their 8-speed automatic transmission that's being brought down from their full-size pickup truck line. The 8-speed automatic is likely going to make that new 3.6-liter version of the Colorado and the Canyon the fastest and possibly the most efficient V6 entry in this segment. I expect it to either match the Ridgeline or perhaps beat it by 1 mile per gallon. Personally, I think that the interior styling and the interior quality in the Ridgeline is just a semi-step above what we find in the GM twins. However, they easily beat both the Nissan and the Toyota in terms of interior refinement and interior function, luxury features, etc. General Motors has also priced the Colorado and the Canyon very aggressively. If you were to comparably equip a Colorado or a Canyon with the V6 and the same size cab that we see in the base version of the Ridgeline, the Colorado would be about $1,000 less, the Canyon would be about $500 less than the Honda. If, however, you start taking a look at midline trims of the Ridgeline and comparable Colorado or Canyon models, then the Ridgeline ends up being just about the same price as the Colorado and the Canyon. Although the Colorado and the Canyon unquestionably win when it comes to towing, the Ridgeline fights back with a lot more practical touches and a better driving experience. The Ridgeline has things like that in-bed trunk, we have that 3-zone climate control, the tailgate that opens in multiple different ways, the availability of the Honda sensing package, which gives us that lane keeping assistance system, radar adaptive cruise control, etc. The handling is without a doubt better than we find in the Colorado and the Canyon as well, thanks very much to that all-wheel drive system with the torque vectoring rear axle. My final word in this segment is that the right vehicle for you really depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for the true off-road pickup truck, especially if you're looking to really modify your pickup truck a great deal after you buy it, then the best choice is the Toyota Tacoma. There are a lot of drawbacks with the Tacoma, but the one major benefit is the availability of all those off-road accessories. The Canyon and the Colorado are definitely catching up, but plenty more is available for that Tacoma. For those of you out there that really need that high towing capacity, or you're looking for a small diesel pickup truck, the Colorado and the Canyon are going to definitely be the option for you in this segment. It also drives more like a mini Silverado, so if you want that more pickup truck-like feel, that's definitely going to be the vehicle of choice for you. However, I suspect that most shoppers in this segment will do best to look at the Honda Ridgeline. The Honda Ridgeline again has that high practicality, it's just easier to drive all the way around. It's going to give you that pickup truck ability, same payload capacity as most of the entries in this particular segment, with the feel of a modern crossover vehicle and that full-time all-wheel drive system. In addition, the Ridgeline is also going to be a little bit easier to park in the city, it's going to be quieter out on the road, and it's going to give you excellent reliability and excellent fuel economy. Even though the Ridgeline itself is new for 2017, most of what we're seeing in the Ridgeline has been tried and true in the Honda Pilot. Now, if my money were on the line in this particular segment, I would probably get the GMC Canyon with either the 3.6-liter V6 or that very tasty turbo diesel. The reason for that is I would in theory be replacing a body-on-frame midsize SUV, and I do have the need to be able to tow over 6,500 pounds on a regular basis. If you're thinking that may sound like a little bit of a flip-flop, I do have to say that if Honda could increase the Ridgeline's towing capacity to say 6,500 or even 7,000 pounds, I would definitely take the Ridgeline over the Colorado or the Canyon simply because of the added creature comforts, the added luxury features, and definitely that Honda sensing system that we find in the Ridgeline. Be sure to click that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen, like this video, comment on this video, find us over at facebook.com, and I'll see you next week. Got my first truck when I was 3, drove 100,000 miles on my knees, hauled marbles and rocks and thought twice before I hauled a Barbie doll bed for the girl next door. She tried to pay me with a kiss and I began to understand there's something women like about a pickup man.